I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justus Burkett.
And today we're here to find out, is Heathers the greatest movie ever made?
Fuck me gently with the chainsaw. Do I look like Mother Teresa?
Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Hey, Sarah, Sarah.
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world. Welcome back once again. I am David Scandura, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host and dead gay son, Justus Burkett.
Yeah. Man... So, I don't know if you've listened to the Heathers the Musical soundtrack, or seen Heathers the Musical, but if you haven't, there is a song in the Heathers Musical, which is I Love My Dead Gay Son, and it's my favorite song on the soundtrack.
It makes sense why they would do that. It's kind of the line of the movie.
Yeah, it's a real showstopper, too. Like, it's such a big, like, classic Broadway number. They were not dirty, they were not wrong. They were just two stray verses in the Lord's big song. It's very, very fun. So yeah, I know we haven't gotten into the movie yet, but yeah, pretty successful musical spin-off from this movie. I think the first movie that we're covering that has a musical adaptation. Obviously, David and I are both involved in theater in some capacity. And I'm not a big musical guy, but the Heathers musical does bang. It never went to Broadway. It was like off Broadway, and then the London scene, West End. It was on the West End in London for like a long time. So kudos to the people who cashed in on this movie on the musical, because they did a bang up job.
Yeah, I just discovered it while researching for this show, but I didn't listen to any of the songs or watch any footage of it. So I'll have to check it out. Apparently there's an American Psycho musical too.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I am rather interested in seeing what that's about.
Yeah, some of our favorites that we may eventually talk about on this podcast, American Psycho being one of them, but also Evil Dead, have musical adaptations. There's an Evil Dead musical.
And I've been frequenting the platform and hell site known as TikTok.
Ah, yes.
There's a lot of like unlicensed musicals that have been making the rounds on there. Footage from them,
right? Where
there's like a fan musical of Saw, a fan musical of Scream, because it was around Halloween time, and I guess those theater companies were running those. But it's like they'll take popular songs, and then just insert new lyrics to them because it's easier than actually writing original music.
Okay. Well, that's a little bit of a bummer, because in my head I was imagining the Saw musical with like original songs and being like, if I don't get help, I'm going to bleed to death. He's going to bleed to death.
Yeah, no, I think the lyrics are original lyrics, but it's over like pop. Pop songs.
That's too bad. I think if you're gonna do it, I feel like going full Broadway with it is the way to go.
How are you doing, Justus?
I'm not good. I'm bad. I don't know where we're gonna cut it, but I did just spill coffee everywhere. But in addition to that, I've been in a funk, man, and I think it's important. One of the things when I suggested doing these check-ins on the show is I think it's important for us as white guys with a podcast who are recording ourselves talking, to normalize like masculine people just being open with their feelings and their emotions and stuff, which you and I are in our friendship. And yeah, I like it's okay to not be okay, and right now I'm like not super okay. Like I've been in a little bit of a funk. It's nothing like I don't want anyone to be concerned. I'm like I'm fine. I'm going to be fine, right? But yeah, I've been having a lot of trouble motivating myself to do like very small basic things. I've been dealing with just like a very severe lack of motivation, just pretty like intense apathy lately, where I'm like, yeah, I could do this like basic thing to kind of hold myself together, or I could just ignore it, and I kind of don't give a shit, so I'm just opting to ignore. And I go through phases like this. I was saying to you off mic, I think it's not uncommon in like a post 2020 like after COVID world to feel this way. I feel like a lot of people feel like they're just going fucking insane like every few months. And that's definitely sort of what's been going on with me, but it's not all bad. Like there have been some highlights to my week, most of which we'll get to in my media recs. But yeah, like I haven't been awesome. And I'm gonna try and be kind to myself, try and excuse the lack of motivation and the apathy a little bit in terms of like feeling guilty about it, because that never really helps anything. But also try and hold myself accountable and make sure that I'm taking care of myself in the ways that I should be. So yeah, kind of a downer check-in on my end this week, but that's okay. Like I said, it's okay to not feel okay. Nobody feels okay all the time. So David, how are you doing this week, my friend?
I'm doing okay, but I want to acknowledge what you said and say that yeah, it's okay to not feel okay. I think the feelings that you're describing are shared by a lot of people, especially now that it's towards the end of the year. We're getting to the holidays. We kind of just want life to slow down a little bit, and it's important to take care of yourself. And I appreciate you being so open and honest with me and our listeners about that. And I hope you feel better, man.
Thanks. I'm a mental health hero. Not really.
But I'm okay. Yeah. Not a ton to report. I just been chilling and watching movies, and so I think we should just jump ahead to our media recommendations. And my crystal ball, called the Letterboxd app, tells me that you're going to talk about The Outwaters and The Empty Man.
Yeah, your crystal ball is absolutely correct, David. Yeah, David gets a spoiler for my media recs because he follows me on Letterboxd. Which, by the way, if you ever want to follow either David or I on Letterboxd, our Letterboxds are linked in the Linktree link on our Twitter and Instagram page. So if you're interested in seeing what we rate some of the movies that we talk about, you can find that there. Anyway, yes, this week I did watch The Empty Man. And I also watched The Outwaters. I also watched The Strangers for the first time, the Liv Tyler 2008 home invasion horror movie. That one is not one of my media recs this week because I thought it was just okay. Like, that movie is not... I wouldn't be like, run out and watch The Strangers, because it's like, yeah, if you have time for it, you can throw it on. If you haven't seen it, you're not really missing anything. But The Empty Man fucking rocks. The Empty Man is so good. I have to give a shout out to another podcaster who doesn't know I exist, David Sims from the Blank Check podcast, because he has been singing the praises of The Empty Man for a while, and I've been like, okay, I saw the trailer for that movie. It looked kind of like a Bye Bye Man, Slender Man type, like schlocky, shitty, based on a creepypasta horror movie, and I was like, probably not going to see that. And then I heard David Sims on Blank Check talking about it, and I was like, if David Sims likes it, maybe I should give this a shot. And I watched it, and it fucking rocks. Imagine a movie in the vein of like Urban Legend or Candyman or Jeepers Creepers, right? Where it's like about like a mythic folk legend monster. And there's like a group of teens who like summon him or whatever. So like imagine that, by way of David Fincher's Seven, and also sort of Lovecraftian cosmic horror. It is so compelling. It goes places you do not expect it to. It's really, really well shot. It's a fucking gorgeous movie. It's filmed on like HDR, like it's like high definition digital. First HDR shot movie that I have thought looked good. I was like, oh shit, like this isn't shot on film, it's like all digital, and they're doing a lot of digital specific, well, I shouldn't say that because I just mentioned Fincher and he shoots on digital and his shit looks really good. So never mind. But point being, it's a beautiful movie, it's great to look at, amazing colors, amazing soundtrack. Lustmord, I don't know how you pronounce it. Ambient noise artist did some of the score for it. And it's just so engrossing, and yeah, fucking huge recommendation for anybody who's interested in horror movies and missed The Empty Man when it came out, because it dropped like in 2020 in like the middle of quarantine. And nobody saw it. Right. So if you haven't watched The Empty Man, watch The Empty Man. It rules. It is so good.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it from people all over the internet, and the director did probably my favorite segment of the Guillermo del Toro Cabinet of Curiosities show.
Yes, the autopsy one.
Yeah, and that had a similar investigative element that I liked too.
Yeah.
But that 2.5 hour runtime is a hard sell for me.
It earns it. And I will say it's broken up. It's paced really well, but also it breaks up that 2.5 hours in a way that makes it a lot more digestible, because the first 20 minutes is basically a prologue that could work as its own standalone short film, which helps that runtime not feel... You don't feel that runtime as much, because basically you watch two stories that are like interconnected, but one of them is like a 20-minute short, and then there's like the hour and 40-minute like rest of the movie. And so it doesn't ever feel stale throughout the runtime, because you basically switch stories 20 minutes in, and it rocks. And I also, you get a 20-minute in title card drop. I fucking love late title card drops in movies. They're so good. But yes, massive recommendation for The Empty Man. Everybody go out and watch it. It rocks. And the other one that you had mentioned that you saw that I watched is indeed a recommendation, The Outwaters, which is a found footage horror movie that was released in some festivals last year, but got its limited theatrical release and like its streaming release this year. So it's pretty new. And I had heard a lot about this one. I'm a huge found footage horror fan, which you know. And had been planning to watch it. Saw that it was available for streaming on Tubi. We fucking love Tubi here. And yeah, gave it a watch, and lighter recommendation than The Empty Man, even though I liked it about as much, because The Outwaters is a movie that some people are gonna fucking love and a lot of people are gonna really, really hate when they watch it. It's like Skinamarink in that regard, because it's like a found footage horror movie that is highly experimental, doesn't give you really any answers, doesn't show a lot. It relies on the viewer's imagination and engagement with the material. It completely relies on that for its success, just like Skinamarink. So if you like movies with a plot where you can understand what's happening, maybe The Outwaters isn't for you. But if you like movies that are rancid vibes for 2 hours, just and people going through the 9 circles of hell, not literally but figuratively. Right, there's 9, right? 9 circles of hell.
I think there's 9.
Yeah. Anyway, then give The Outwaters a shot, but lighter recommendation, just because I know a lot of people won't like it as much as I did.
Yeah, I don't remember how I heard about that movie, because I don't know anything about it. I don't know any buzz behind it. But when I saw it logged in your letterbox, I was like, oh, huh, you watched that movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that was, how I came across it, but it's sort of been on my periphery. So
yeah, it's a real love it or hate it, but I think you should give it a shot. I don't know whether you'll love it or hate it, or you might land somewhere in the middle.
I'll add it to my massive to-be watch list.
Yeah.
God bless that platform.
Yeah. Anyway,
cool.
Media Rex on your end, David.
Well, I did a pretty unhinged double feature where I watched the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from the 70s with Gene Wilder.
Nice.
One of my favorite childhood films.
Yeah.
Used to be like in my top 20, 5 out of 5 perfect movie, basically. Has fallen for me a little bit just because I think as I've gotten older, my tastes have changed ever so slightly, but still a pretty amazing, funny, clever, entertaining, creative movie.
Yeah.
And then I thought, let's watch the Tim Burton Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Bad idea.
With T.G. Eminem. Oh, God. That's not the show. With T.G. MEM alumni Johnny Depp.
Yep.
And I had seen it in the theaters, but I hadn't seen it since then. And I sat down and watched it. One of the worst fucking things I've ever seen in my entire life.
It's bad.
What a steaming pile of shit.
It's really fucking bad.
There is almost nothing redeemable about that movie.
Yeah.
Or the few things that are ever so slightly redeemable, like some elements of the production design. Danny Elfman's score is kind of cool in points, completely negated by all of the awful shit happening in that fucking movie.
Yeah, it's a big pile of doo-doo.
And I find it insulting.
Yeah.
It's one of those where it's like, I have a grudge against this movie for existing. So big recommend on that original Chocolate Factory. Gene Wilder, one of the greats, one of the greatest to ever do it.
Yeah.
Stay far away from that shit ass abortion that is the Tim Burton remake. Tim Burton should be ashamed of himself.
Yeah, I think he would be if he wasn't sitting on a giant pile of cash and laughing. Have you ever seen his Alice in Wonderland?
No.
That's also dog. Oh, don't. It's
Oh.
so bad. It's also complete dog shit. It's maybe a little better than Chocolate Factory, but that's a low bar.
And people are like excited for him to do Beetlejuice 2. And I'm like, have you seen what Tim Burton has been doing for the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Just churning out shit.
There's like some, and it's not like super latter Burton, but it's like at least relatively late Burton. There's a few where I'm like, okay, that one's all right. I know some people talk shit about Corpse Bride. I liked it. I know
I have not seen Corpse Bride, but I know that's a fan favorite for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna go to bat for that movie being like it's one of his best or anything, but I'm like it's a good movie. It's fun. And also, like Big Fish is good. And that's not super late Burton, but later, right? So I think Tim Burton has it in him to make a good movie in 2023. I don't know if he will. But yeah, anyway.
I also watched Hostel, directed by Eli Roth.
Yes.
Because we're going to go see Thanksgiving immediately after this recording.
Yes, we are.
And I've never seen an Eli Roth movie. And surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because I've always heard it lumped in with the torture porn genre.
Right.
If you want to call it that. And it's not. It's funny. And it's clever. There's a nice element of satire to it. It's certainly violent, but not gratuitous or like grisly or depressing to the point of like a Saw movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's gory and it's violent, but I think it's intended to be at least a little fun.
Yeah.
And I laughed and had a great time with it. Surprised at how much I liked it. Have a lot more faith that Thanksgiving is going to be a good time after watching it. So.
Yeah. I'm excited for Thanksgiving. I hadn't heard a damn thing about that movie, and then the Podmaster showed me the trailer, and I was like, oh, this actually looks like it's gonna be kind of a fun, silly little slasher. So we'll see.
Let's get into today's film. We are talking about Heathers from 1988, directed by Michael Lehmann. This is my second time around with this movie. I watched it a couple years ago. A friend showed it to me, and I immediately loved it.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen anything else that he's done. He has kind of a small career,
and sort of a notably critically derided career other than this movie. I was looking at some of the other movies he's directed. I don't think I've seen any of them either. But some of the other credits that he has, like I think he either wrote or directed Hudson Hawk.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to be bad.
Yeah.
What's that fucking legal thriller about sexual harassment in the workplace? I don't remember the name of the movie, but there's another one in there that's supposed to be a real stinker. And I'm like, how did the guy, and it's the writer and director from this movie who went on to work on like both of those movies. And I'm like, how are these guys making Heathers and then just apparently only making bad movies from that point on?
Yeah, he also did Airheads, which is kind of a cult comedy with Brendan Fraser and about metalheads that I've always wanted to see but never gotten around to it.
Yeah.
He's also done television for True Blood, Veronica Mars, American Horror Story, stuff like that.
Right.
But this is probably his most well-known and respected film.
Yeah.
Although it wasn't a success when it came out.
Right. But it has definitely reached cult status. Like,
Yeah.
this is like a cult film in a big way.
Yeah. So the writer, Daniel Waters, originally wanted Stanley Kubrick to direct this.
Can you imagine?
That would be so weird.
I'm trying to even think what that would look like. Because, like, one of the things that makes this movie work, I feel like, is that you get some of the tone and, like, the genre tropes and conventions of, like, a John Hughes, like, high school type movie executed, like, with a little bit of sincerity, and then the script is subverting those things and poking fun at them and stuff.
Yeah, there's this interesting thing that happens with the big genres of the 80s, which I would consider to be action, horror, and the teen high school comedy.
Right.
Where when we get towards the end of the 80s, they start reflecting and satirizing the tropes that they've established. And by the time we get to the 90s, we're just fully doing that.
Right.
Until something comes along that reinvents it.
Yeah.
It's surprising how much this movie kind of has disdain and distaste for the tropes of the 80s high school movie, while
Yes.
also being a good teen high school movie.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing that I'm like, could Kubrick have pulled this off? Like, it's the wrong movie for him.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if he would have been able to do the winky tongue-in-cheek thing with the John Hughes style high school movie. He obviously did do that very effectively in, like, Doctor Strangelove, right? I like, it's funny that the writer of this movie was like, I want Stanley Kubrick for this, because I, like, when I watch this movie, I'm like, I don't think Stanley Kubrick would have been good at this.
I can't imagine Stanley Kubrick even, like, reading this script. Like, I imagine the script comes across his desk.
Right.
He reads the first few pages and throws it in the trash.
Yeah, he would see the line, fuck me gently with a chainsaw. What do I look like, Mother Teresa? And he'd be like, nope. Hard pass.
So this stars Winona Ryder and Christian Slater. Winona Ryder got this role when she was 16. She begged to have it. She was just coming off of Beetlejuice. This is her 5th movie.
Yeah.
Winona Ryder, fucking amazing actor.
Yes, love Winona Ryder. I've enjoyed her in every single thing I've ever seen her in. Obviously she's great as a young actress in this and Beetlejuice. Late era Winona Ryder also rules, like, even in Stranger Things, a show that I think is kind of just okay. She's always one of the highlights for me. So, like, yeah, Winona Ryder rules. We're pro Winona on this podcast.
Yeah.
Also crazy that she was only, like, 15 to 16 years old when this movie was filming, because she gives such a nuanced, mature, there's so much depth in this performance, and I'm like, that's crazy that she was this good at acting as, like, a child. It's bananas how good she is in this movie.
She's acting her ass off in this fucking movie.
Yeah, she really is, and she really gets the tone, right? Because this is like a satire, and but it's like we kind of already mentioned, it's a satire that also kind of plays it pretty straight at times. It's a satire, but it isn't a full-on, off-the-walls parody, right? And so there has to be, like, a level of like, sincerity in this performance that is, like, the backbone of it, even though some crazy and wild moments happen in this movie. And yet she had to be able to balance those things, and she does it immaculately. Like, she's so good.
Yeah, I think a lot of young actresses at the time, her contemporaries, this script came across their desk and they turned it down because it was too dark or what have you. And you can tell that she gets this.
Mm-hmm. She
understands it. She knows how to pull it off. And she's just pitch perfect for this material.
Yeah. You know who else is pitch perfect for this material?
Christian fucking Slater.
I love Christian Slater in this movie.
He's such a little rat fuck.
So I've seen a lot of comparisons between this performance and, like, young Jack Nicholson, and most recently from our friend and listener to the show, Kevin. who logged this on Letterboxd last night when we both also did. So by coincidence, he had also just watched Heathers. But I've seen that comparison from multiple people between this Slater performance and Jack Nicholson. And when I was watching it last night, weirdly, the thing that I was getting more than that was Heath Ledger Joker. He is like so delightfully psychopathic in this movie.
Well, when he starts ranting about society, you can't help but think this kid's gonna grow up to be the Joker.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize the Nicholson comparisons until I saw that in our dear listener Kevin's review.
Yeah.
And then I looked it up, and it sounds like Christian Slater actually intentionally patterned his performance off of Jack Nicholson.
Yes.
But he's great. This is a breakout role for him. He kind of goes on to star in a few movies like True Romance, Interview with the Vampire. His career has kind of taken a bit of a resurgence recently with his role in the show Mr. Robot. But this is one of the few things that I've seen him in. I'm seen Winona Ryder and many more things than I've seen Christian Slater in.
Yeah, and I'm not like a huge Slater head, although I do love him in Interview with the Vampire, although he's a smaller part in that. He's like a little bit role. But this performance, I am crazy about.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's such a good performance.
The Podmaster and I were talking about this last night when we were watching the movie, about how he's not even that conventionally attractive in this movie, but there is something so magnetic about him where it's like you get how Veronica Sawyer, even though this guy is a murderous sociopath, just there's something about him that she just can't quit. You know? And it's like, yeah, I get that magnetism. You know, I get how he draws people in, you know? Because even though he's like this creepy little weasel of a man, he's like also just a very, very charming. Which is, yeah, it's such a great performance.
Yeah. This movie was made on a $3 million budget. It flopped pretty hard, only making $1.1 million at the box office, but it's one of the huge cult films of the 80s these days. It led to, like we mentioned earlier, there's a stage musical that was quite successful, and then a TV series that had one season in 2018 that aired on the Paramount Network.
I bet that was bad.
That's what it sounds like. Sounds like it was pretty widely panned.
Yeah.
They canceled it after one season, and it was heavily edited and delayed because, you know, America in the 2020s, lots of mass shootings were happening kind of around the same period that the show was on.
Right.
Which kind of contributes to my theory. This movie is a bit of a product of the 80s, and it should kind of stay there.
Yeah, I mean, because of the high school murderous sociopath thing, the JD in a trench coat killing his classmates. You're saying
it's genuinely shocking to me that this movie was made.
Yeah,
even at the time, and I think it's great. I think it's incredible. There's absolutely no way I could picture this movie working in a modern context.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, yes, it's razor sharp, this movie, right? And it is very like, it's a black comedy. It's a pitch black comedy. This is like very, very dark, right? And yeah, you're right. Like with the cultural context of like America's history of gun violence, and especially gun violence in schools. And also, not for nothing, most of the notable perpetrators of gun violence in this country looking a lot and sounding a lot like JD in this movie, right? You know, somewhat handsome, skinny little white boy with lots of opinions about how society should work. Right? It's like, yeah, this movie came out. The Podmaster is texting me her contributions to this conversation. She said it's a pre-Columbine film, which is true, right?
Yes, and I felt that while I was watching it, and I was like, oh my god, we're just a few years away from Columbine.
Yeah, and so this movie, like, to your point, David, like, it does predate like gun violence in schools, right? This was sort of like an imagined scenario, right? Or a scenario without a lot of historical context for things like this happening in real life, right? And so it reads better as satire in the 80s of the high school movie, where now watching this movie, it reads more as a social satire of the world that we fucking live in every day, where there's, you know, sniveling little fucking shits like JD all over the news multiple times a year. And yeah, and I think you're right. I think it works better as a comedy in the 80s. But I don't think that, I think if anything, its edges sharpened watching it in 2023, right? It's maybe not as funny, but it is just as smart, if not more so, right?
Yeah. I can agree with that for sure. Let's jump into the plot. We start off being introduced to the titular Heathers, which are a group of 3 girls, all named Heather, that kind of they're the kings or the queens of the high school.
Yes.
We have
they are girl boss slay queens.
Yeah. We have Heather Chandler, who's our queen bee, played by Kim Walker. Heather Duke, played by Shannen Doherty, and Heather McNamara, played by Lisanne Frank.
Yeah.
And we start off in this sort of dream sequence of them playing croquet that's set to a cover of Que Sera Sera.
Whatever will be, will be. That song is used in so many movies. I don't think I've heard the song Que Sera Sera outside of a movie, and yet I have heard it like 50 times in my life.
I think it's famously featured in Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Yes.
The one with James Stewart, because I know he remade his own movie.
Yes.
And it's in that movie like 4 times.
It truly is.
It's all I remember from that movie.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it pops up a lot. But anyway, good cover of the song here for this title sequence.
Yeah.
And yeah, we see kind of at the end of this like kind of dreamy sequence that they're hitting croquet balls at Veronica Sawyer, Winona Ryder's character, at her head. She's like buried up to the neck, and they're hitting croquet balls at her head. And this indicates immediately her relationship with this group of popular girls, where she feels like she is being wronged by them.
And so we start off in this sequence in the school cafeteria. We can meet all the cliques. We see some of our background characters and our side characters. The big kind of focus of this is
the shoulder pads. I think the big focus is the shoulder pads. I think this movie won the gold medal at the shoulder pad Olympics. Sorry, the blazers that these high school girls are wearing, they look like they have the shoulders and lats of like a bodybuilder because they're so massive. Sorry, I cut you off. I needed to address the shoulder pads. The big focus is
God damn it.
Sorry.
The big action of this scene are the Heathers ask Veronica to forge the handwriting of Martha, who's she's an overweight kid. She's kind of a loner.
Yes. We will exclusively, by the way, this is Podmaster has mandated this.
Yes.
We will exclusively be referring to Martha as Martha Dunstock, or just by the name Martha. We will not be using the very mean nickname that people gave her in the movie, which is, and this is the only time we're going to say it, Martha Dump Truck.
Yeah.
We will not be saying that.
I can agree to those terms.
It's a very, very mean, and the Podmaster feels very protective of Martha.
Yeah, I think this is a pro Martha podcast.
Yes.
This movie has, I think, very little sympathy for any of its characters, parents and kids included, except for Veronica and Martha.
Yeah.
And Betty,
yes,
who we'll also mention here.
Yes, I think that's true. There's a bigger point that I want to make about this movie's kind of sense of empathy later, but I do agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. They're asking her to forge this note she's going to emulate the handwriting style of one of the jocks. and it's a quote going to give her showerhead masturbation fodder for a week, which is a great line. A lot of great lines in this movie.
Yeah, very, very good screenplay.
Very good. But yeah, we kind of get the sense that like Veronica's the low one on the pecking order here. She was just kind of brought into this clique as someone that they can pick on and bully and use subtly to their own ends.
Yeah, and it does sort of have the vibe that she's kind of being hazed by these popular girls as a requirement to join their social strata, right? It's like she has to be, the reason that she's kind of being picked on is because that's what they do to the new one. To initiate them is kind of the vibe that I get.
Yeah, I think so too. I think she's kind of new to the group,
right?
And this is her way into this popular elite group of students,
right?
There's a part here where Veronica meets her friend Betty, who she used to hang out with more, and Betty shows her like photographs of them as kids, and it's kind of occurring in the background for most of the movie, but essentially what it sounds like that Veronica abandoned Betty and sold out her friendship with Betty in order to get in with the Heathers.
Right. Because Betty is unpopular because she has glasses, I guess, and is poor. Is something that's like vaguely alluded to, and therefore is less popular than the Heathers. And Veronica, in order to climb the social ladder, had to leave Betty behind. Yeah.
And so the Heathers and Veronica are doing this poll.
Yes.
Where they ask students a question and take a poll.
Yeah.
And the question is, aliens land on Earth tomorrow, the same day that you win $5 million, but they're going to destroy the world in 2 days, so what do you do?
Yes.
And everyone gives really stupid answers.
Yeah. One of my favorites is, because there's a little montage of this, them going around to like various kids at the school asking this question. One of my favorites is they ask like all of these stoners who are like out in the parking lot, like smoking weed by one of their cars. And one of them is just like, that's like a real, I don't remember exactly what he says, but he's like, that's like a really heavy question, man. I just think it's very funny.
I think one of the stoners says like, I would break into the zoo, kidnap a lion,
yes.
shove a bomb up the lion's ass,
and then
we can die as one.
Yes, the lion and I can die as one. Yeah. Anytime they show, the stoners are very, very much like periphery characters in this movie. They're like not the focus of the movie at all. But anytime one of those stoners like has a moment in this movie, it was always making me laugh. I love those guys.
Yeah. Another great joke of this sequence is after Veronica and Heather Chandler finished talking to a group of like preps or something, Veronica's bummed out and she wants to she's like, why can't we just talk to other people or hang out with other people? And we get well, fuck me gently with the chainsaw.
Do I look like Mother Teresa?
And she's like, we might as well hang out with the nerds. And then Heather Chandler gestures to the nerds, and then we see a nerd spit out his milk. He's like, Heather looked at me.
Yeah.
That's a great bit.
Yes. Also in here, we have gotten some shots of JD, which is Christian Slater's character. He's kind of sitting in like the very, very corner of the cafeteria next to a kid who's just asleep.
Yeah. He's asleep for the whole scene.
Yes. And he is just watching Veronica mostly, is kind of, but we've had him kind of in the periphery of this whole thing as it's going on. So then eventually Veronica does walk up to JD and ask him the question. And he gives some fucking pseudo deep answer where he's like, oh, I'd, go out onto a lake in a boat or some shit. This guy fucking sucks.
Well, I love his first line when she walks up to him.
Yeah.
And says hello, and he says, greetings and salutations.
Yes.
Which is both he both gives you the impression that he's hip and cool, but also he's kind of pathetic and a fucking loser.
Yes, yeah. He like this.
He's charismatic.
Yes,
but he's really just as shallow and pathetic as everyone else that he criticizes in this movie.
Yes, this character, JD's character, is so easily identifiable now in 2023. In 88, this was like a much more like novel type of guy to be putting to screen, I think. But now we all identify this guy immediately because it's like we all know that guy. He's like he is the shitty, toxic white guy boyfriend in this movie that like, and everybody's familiar with the trope now. Like, he's the guy who is gonna like show you American Psycho and then be like, Patrick Bateman is literally me. Like, the podmaster is pointing at herself because that's her. She's a toxic white boy.
Yeah, that's
in
also me
disguise.
too.
Yeah, but like, but you know what I'm saying? Like, this
Yeah.
guy has fucking huge incel vibes, right? But he's not like, he's the type of guy who would be an incel if he was less handsome and charismatic. But because he is handsome and charismatic, he's actually able to get laid, which somehow makes him worse. You know, like, that's this guy's energy. By the way, amazing Christian Slater impression.
Thanks.
He does the greetings and salutations again to Martha later, and it made me laugh the second time. Yeah.
Martha gets up at some point after she's found the note on her lunch tray that they snuck onto her lunch tray when she wasn't looking, and she reads it, and she walks over to the jocks and shows the note to one of them, and they immediately laugh in her face, and she storms out of the cafeteria crying.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
And the jocks are attracted to Veronica. They're also attracted to the Heathers. One of them gets jealous that JD and Veronica are talking. So after Veronica leaves, they both get
Let's
up and
kick his ass.
Yeah, they both get up and go over to JD. We get our first of many F slurs in this movie.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of F slurs in this movie. Yeah. It was the 80s.
It was the 80s.
Yeah.
And JD pulls out a gun
and fires it
and shoots it.
Yes.
And we immediately cut to the next scene, which is the Heathers playing croquet at Veronica's house.
Yes.
But this man just pulls out a gun in the cafeteria.
Yes. So this is another thing that just, this movie's a product of its time, because a kid pulls out an actual gun with blanks in it and shoots off two of them on school property, and then is just allowed to continue attending school, which, if this happened in 2023, the police would respond. JD would not be shot by the police because he's white, but he would spend 70 years in prison. He would never see the light of day ever again.
Yeah, and so the next scene, the Heathers are talking about, like, if he's going to continue school or whatnot. Because, you know, should he be expelled? Should he be suspended? And they mentioned that he shot them with blanks.
Yeah.
Which, at that close range, those fuckers are still dead with blanks.
Potentially. They at least have powder burns.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Lost my place. But yeah, the Heathers are at Veronica's house.
Playing
croquet.
Playing croquet, which in my notes I do have, yes, croquet, aka golf for shittier, richer people. Because there is nothing more like just millionaire/billionaire class that's an immediate indicator to me that these people fucking suck shit than having them play croquet. I'm just like, yes, croquet, the sport of fucking terrible people.
In a yard with, like, fountains and statues.
Yeah.
Veronica's parents are well off, which I think is an interesting element in this movie, is that the Heathers are obviously rich. Christian Slater's dad is rich.
Yes, JD is very rich.
And Veronica's rich, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are all shitty rich kids that are our main characters. Like, the main focus in the movie is all shitty rich kids, which I think is an interesting choice.
They're getting ready for a party tonight, a university party, and I love these short scenes that Veronica has with her parents, where they have a good relationship, but it's also a very surface level one.
Right. Yeah, her parents are not really interested in what's going on in her life. You get the vibe, right? They're basically just like, oh yeah, our daughter Veronica, who we love and is around. Right?
How's it going? Are there any boys? Prom's coming up. Just very surface level things. And she takes off to go to the party. They stop at a convenience store.
Yes, they stop at a Snappy Snack Shack, and Christian Slater is there. And Veronica and him have a little bit of an exchange about the snappy snack. about the snappy snack shack, and in which Christian Slater mentions that because he moves around a lot because of his dad's construction business, and he mentions that anywhere he's ever lived, he can rely on the snappy snack shack. That's really hard to say. He can rely on the snappy snack shack being there and getting a turbo dog. And immediately I was like, I must have a snappy snack shack. God damn it, turbo dog.
Yeah, I did gain a little bit of respect for incel and murderer JD, because at least he's a gas station hot dog enjoyer.
That's the one part of his character that I can relate to. Is going to town on a turbo dog.
But yeah, he's moved around a lot. It sounds like they connect for a moment outside about being loners and how Veronica doesn't really feel like she fits in with her friends.
Yeah.
They go to this university party, and she's introduced to this guy who she's completely uninterested in. He's asking just very basic surface level questions.
Yes, I believe this is the guy that when they show up has a line that I thought was extremely funny, which is, "Hello, ladies, throw your coats on the floor." Instead of like, hang them up, or may I take your coat, or we're all putting them on the bed, he's just like, throw your coats on the floor. Which I thought was very funny.
I like this part when she's so bored at this party where she starts to trying to hold her hand near a burning match as long as she can take it.
Yeah.
And then she drops it in her glass. Her glass sets on fire, and she throws it outside, and it lands in a garbage can, which then sets the trash on fire.
Yes. While Veronica is having a bad time at this party, by the way, we're cutting back and forth between the party and her writing in her diary, which this is a device that the movie uses a lot, is Veronica as narration, like Winona Ryder's voice narrating over the movie as like what she's writing in her diary. And I just want to call out, I know everybody who has seen this movie has already made this observation, but Winona Ryder dementedly scribbling into her journal while wearing a fucking monocle is one of the greatest things in a movie. I just fucking love it so much. It's so funny anytime she has that monocle in and is just like frantically scribbling. And it matches so well with the tone of the voiceover. It's just, it's very good and very fun.
Yeah, in this room, that guy comes in, and he's like, "So we fucking or not?" And is just a real sleazeball to her.
Yeah, and she gets all kind of she's offended by this. She's gonna put him in his place, and she like starts to try and lecture him, and he says, "Save the speeches for Malcolm X." I just want to get laid. So this guy fucking sucks, and this party fucking sucks, and Veronica's had enough of it, and she's leaving. Right?
Yeah, and she runs into Heather on the way out and throws up on her shoes.
Yes.
And then they have this fight outside.
Yes.
In this blue alleyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like the lighting's blue, and then it's illuminated by the fire from the trash can.
Yes.
This scene looks like it's from The Thing.
It does. It does. And also, in the dream sequence later, jumping a little bit ahead in the movie, in the dream sequence later, when Veronica sees dead Heather in her dream, it's lit the same way. It's the blue and red again. It's very interesting. And I noticed that for the first time on this watch, because I've seen this movie a couple times, but this was the first time where I was like, oh, when she sees dead Heather, it's lit the same as the alleyway sequence where they basically break up as friends, right?
Yeah. Brief tangent, since we brought it up. This movie looks great.
Yeah.
I love the lighting. I love the production design. There's a lot of like pastel colors, and the it's almost, dare I say, kind of Lynchian, where it has this. There's a timelessness to it.
And a dreamlike quality.
It feels slightly 50s.
Yeah.
It's also clearly set in the 80s, but it feels like it could be set at any time, really.
Yeah.
And with some of the dream sequences and just in general the movie being very colorful even when people aren't dreaming.
Yeah.
It's kind of Lynchian a
wouldn't
little bit.
I wouldn't be surprised if this was a little Lynch influence. Because like Blue Velvet had already come out at this point, and very, very different movies, but like you can tie together some common threads there.
Yeah, Lynchian is a totally overused word, but
Yes.
that's the only word that I have for it at the moment.
Yeah.
The only word that I have to describe how this movie looks at the moment.
Yes, I really like the lighting, like you mentioned. I also like kind of like the soft focus. Like it seems like a lot of this movie, I don't know if there's like an effect on the lens. I don't know enough about movie making to know how they did it, but there does just seem to be kind of like a soft, like dreamy, kind of misty quality to a lot of the images in this movie.
Yeah. But they're fighting outside, and Heather's like talking about how she would be nothing without her.
Yes. The way that this fight starts, by the way, sorry, I just keep harping on stuff in this script because I think the script is so funny. It's very funny because like Veronica leaves the party and Heather follows her, and Heather goes, "You stupid fuck," and then Veronica's like, "You goddamn bitch." I love both of those line deliveries. It's very, very funny.
Yeah, there's a really great use of slang and language in this movie that, again, doesn't feel, well, there are certain words in this movie that are dated.
Yes, like the F slur.
Like the F slur a lot. But it doesn't feel particularly 80s specific.
Yeah,
again, and has that timeless quality to it.
Yeah, and like heavy use of profanity in this screenplay, in a way that really plays up kind of like the dark edge to this movie that separates it from the stuff that it's satirizing, like the John Hughes stuff, right? Where it's like, yeah, you might get like a couple of F-bombs in like a typical 80s high school movie. This one has a shit ton. Because this movie is meaner and nastier than those movies. And like the dialogue kind of bears that out, which I like.
Yeah, so as she's writing in her diary later, she's just narrating about how she's so fed up with Heather Chandler and wants to kill her.
Yes. In the way that like a high school student would say something like that.
Yeah.
It's important to note, because of what ultimately ends up happening, that Veronica Sawyer never actually has murderous intent. She doesn't actually want to kill anybody. It's just that high school thing of like, oh, I fucking hate this person, I wish they were dead, you know, in kind of that cynical overreactive teen way, right?
Yeah. When she finishes writing, JD pops into her window.
Yep.
And they go play croquet on the lawn, which means they just fuck.
They fuck each other.
We see their clothes strewn about the yard with the croquet equipment, and they are in the throes of post-coital glow.
Yes.
And JD's like, okay, let's kill Heather.
Yeah. And Veronica's reaction is like, oh, haha, like, yeah, that would be so crazy if we did that, sort of thing, because she doesn't think he's serious.
Yeah.
But we soon find out that he is in fact serious.
Yeah, they somehow break into Heather Chandler's house the next morning.
Yeah.
And they're gonna under the pretense of making her a hangover cure that's gonna cause her to throw up to embarrass her.
Right, because there was a thing where Veronica puked on Heather's shoes, and that's kind of what started the argument.
Right.
And she even had a line to her where she was like, I like made you popular and you repay me in puke. Like it was like a whole thing. So the poetic justice that Veronica is looking for is to be there when Heather fucking hurls.
Yeah, so Veronica starts looking in the cabinets in the fridge, and
she's gonna mix like orange juice and milk.
Orange juice and milk, but JD immediately goes for the Drano.
Yep. He's like, drain cleaner, this'll do it.
And Veronica thinks he's joking.
Yes.
And he kind of hammers it home a couple times, like, no, this is what we should use. And this does not at all register as a red flag to her.
No. Well, she is still caught up in the charismatic Christian Slater of it all.
Yeah. They put it into he pours the Drano into a coffee cup. She pours her mixture into another coffee cup. They kiss, and she grabs the wrong one.
Yes. On
her way up to Heather's bedroom. And JD thinks about stopping her, but backs off on that.
Yeah. Yes. And and so they go into a room with the mug. She's basically like, oh, like, what is this? You're here to fucking bitch at me more or whatever. And they're like, no, like it's a hangover cure, like drink this. And she's like, oh, like you think I'm gonna drink this just because you tell me to? Like this is clearly gonna be like something gross, like you spit in this or something. And basically the tactic that they take is like, well, if you're too scared to drink it. And she's like, oh, do you think that's gonna work on me? And then it immediately does, and she's like, give me that, and just chugs it. And her mouth turns all blue and she starts choking and she fucking falls through a glass coffee table and dies.
And did you see what was on the coffee table?
No.
Oh
wait, the bell jar?
The bell jar.
Okay, yes. So I did see this because so she falls over, it crashes through the coffee table. And then, yes, basically, Veronica and JD start thinking about what they're going to do, because they're basically like, what are we going to tell the cops? We just murdered somebody. And JD gets the idea from looking at the cover of the bell jar, which is very funny.
It's not even the bell jar. It's like spark notes of the bell jar.
Right.
And there's a magazine that says in big red letters, "The Fall of the American Teenager," which was just a very funny pun.
Yes.
After seeing an American teenager fall through a coffee table dead.
It is very funny. There's a lot of like visual stuff like that in this movie too.
Yeah.
Like a lot of like little visual gags. But yes, so JD gets the idea from looking at the cover of this bell jar spark notes or whatever. For those of you who may not get the joke, I'll spell it out for you. Sylvia Plath famously killed herself. Author of the bell jar. And the thing that they decide to do here is frame this as a suicide. So I thought it was so fucking funny that's where he gets the idea.
And I like this line from Veronica here where she says, "I'll have to send my SAT scores to San Quentin instead of Stanford."
Yes.
She's distraught, but she gets through this, and they forge another suicide note because Veronica's talent, which comes up several times in this movie, is her ability to imitate handwriting.
Yes.
They have this little debate over what words Heather would use in her suicide note. Yes,
there's the really funny one which is myriad. They use the word myriad in the suicide note, and Veronica's like, Heather would never use the word myriad. She like missed that word on a vocab quiz. And then JD's like, well, all the more reason for her to use it in a suicide note. It's like a testament to her academic failures. and then in the scene that follows this with like the school board or the teacher meeting at the school, there is like one of the teachers is like, she even used the word myriad in her she, like the correct usage of the word myriad in her suicide note was like so touching.
Yeah, it's the teacher meeting, and the teachers are figuring out how do they handle breaking this to the school,
right?
And this movie is really, again, like really cynical and I think unsympathetic to adults, because all of the teachers in this scene are just portrayed as out of touch caricatures, really.
Yeah. And I think a thing that this movie is very explicit about when it comes to the adult characters is that like these adults care more about their kids dead than they do alive. Right? Which is a thing that kind of happens multiple times in the movie. We kind of get that that message hammered home more, right? Which is like these parents kind of don't know what to do with their teen children. They kind of don't know how to behave to them, don't know how to talk to them, don't know how to engage to them. And then as soon as one of their kids is dead or is like assumed to be dead, right? Then suddenly the compassion comes out, right? And so I think that that's a thing that this movie is trying to like specifically say is it's like, yeah, like, you know, try to be compassionate to your children, try to engage with your children while they're around, not just when they're fucking, you know, in the ground. Right.
Yeah. And we're introduced to, I think her name is Mrs. Fleming here. She's kind of the main teacher of the movie.
Yes.
And she's portrayed she's portrayed like a hippie.
Yes.
And the other teachers and school staff don't like her.
Yeah.
Or they think she's
too touchy-feely.
Yeah. And she's big about like let's express our emotions and talk and hug it out.
Yes.
And it's interesting seeing that perspective portrayed negatively, but I also think, like you alluded to earlier, it's all a means to an end, and
Yes.
it's all done cynically.
Yes.
And she only is expressing this because kids are dying, and it's not.
And also to get herself attention and recognition, which
Yeah.
we see later. We can jump ahead and talk about this for a second. Because I think it's important to this character, right? It's like, yeah, the other teachers who are being a little bit more like cold and cynical about the kids offing themselves, right? Kind of look down on the more quote unquote like sympathetic one, this hippie teacher, right? But then when you see her get her way and they have like a hand holding kumbaya, let's all talk about our feelings session, she invites a fucking TV crew to come film it. And she talks to them like on the news about it, right? So it's not actually about the kids. It's about and this again feels so ahead of its time, because you see these people a lot, right? Who are like very like, I'm all about self-care and I'm such an empath, right? You see those types of people, right? Where if you scratch the surface of those types of people, sometimes it becomes very clear that they are that way because they want people to view them that way, not because they actually give a shit about other people, right? And to me, that's this hippie character. That's very clearly her deal. It's like, it's all about, I need to be recognized as the most empathetic, the most like kind, the most whatever, right? And it's not actually that I care about these kids and what's happening to them. It's that I need everyone to know how nice and kind and empathetic I am.
Yeah, and the next scene is in her class where she is like, let's talk about this, and pass around Heather's suicide note.
Yeah, right.
Which again is a fake, but it's like it's one of the wilder moments of this movie where I was like, oh wow, okay.
Right, because she doesn't actually know how to go about this the right way. She just wants people to see her as the person who cares, right? And yeah, so they they do pass around the suicide note. And Winona Ryder here she's clearly like feeling slightly guilty about this, but also is not really like she's not fully convinced that what she did was like entirely wrong yet. Right? Because partially it was an accident, but she's kind of not sad that Heather's gone. Right?
Yeah, there's the next scene where Veronica and JD are at JD's house, and they're watching Heather Duke is interviewed on local news about her friend dying, and they make a comment about how Heather is like trying to get on as many channels as she can.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's another moment of this movie, and it's kind of Heather Duke's arc as she sees this as an opportunity to take her position as like queen bee at the school.
Yeah, and really that's kind of just writ large for all of the characters, really kind of accept Veronica and the lower social status kids at the school, right? But like all of the Heathers and JD and all of the adults, the kind of common thing with them is basically like when somebody dies, when a tragedy happens in this movie, all of them are immediately like, how can I make this benefit me personally? Right? How can I make this person's death about me?
Yeah.
Which it's like, yeah, like that's such an incisive piece of like criticism about like the Reagan era, because this came out in 88, right? So we were like, Reaganism was in full swings, like all the fucking rage, right? And to me it's like so clear that that's kind of where this movie is coming from, where some of the anger in this screenplay is coming from, is it's like that's how America was in the 80s, right? And continues to be to this day, right? Is basically like when some terrible misfortune befalls some actual real person, right? Or group of people or country or whatever, immediately American individuals, but also American politicians and corporations are instantly like, well, how can I make this all about me? How can I benefit from this?
Yeah, and we also immediately need to find a scapegoat.
Yeah.
Which happens in the next scene, which is the funeral scene, where the priest is talking about, he blames it on MTV and video games, this supposed suicide.
Yeah. We do have to bounce. I know we're at the funeral now. We have to bounce back to JD's house for just 1 second to talk about JD's dad.
Okay.
Because JD's dad is one of my favorite fucking characters in this movie. He is so comically evil. He is a supervillain. I'm convinced that when this guy is off screen, he's like fighting Batman.
He's in construction.
Yes.
But he just blows up buildings.
Yes, and takes like perverse glee in the fact that someone didn't want the building demolished and he got to blow it up, right? Like there's later, I don't even remember, it's like a historical society or something was trying to block one of the buildings that his company demoed. And he's like, we showed those fucks. He's like, he gets like really like, so much like joy out of like, taking away something that somebody else cared about.
And we'll just cross all of our boxes with JD's dad off right now.
Yeah.
JD's mom's not in the picture,
right?
Because she walked into a library that JD's dad was going to demolish.
Yes.
Like right before, and then the explosives went off, and she died in the library.
The implication is that she did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also thought the implication could be that JD's dad was trying to kill her.
Yeah, maybe. But either way, it's either a murder or a suicide, right, by the mom, or that happened to the mom. And also there's a thing with JD and his dad where JD talks to his dad as if the dad is his son, and his dad like does the bit back and talks to JD as if JD is his dad, which is very weird. I love how, and I love that they don't dwell on it. It just happens. And it's just like such a fun, weird, idiosyncratic thing between these two fucking psychopaths. Because him and his dad are both like psychopaths.
The only scenes that we have in JD's house are in like the living room with the TV.
Mm-hmm.
And they've just moved in, and there's still boxes that they haven't unpacked, but they've unpacked free weights.
Yep.
And then we see later in the movie, they have a radio and a record player that are both like made out of rocks.
Yes.
Or slabs of concrete. Like,
yes.
Like the turntable is literally a slab of concrete with a turntable platter and a stylus on top of it.
Yes. And I think that this is kind of the movie, like, again, just showing you in another way that these guys are two fucking psychos. They're sociopaths, right? They don't have interests. And like everything is very like bare and utilitarian in the house, right? And it's like the weights are out, the fucking TV and the record player and the radio are out, and that's it. That's all you need. Right? There's like no decorations on the walls or anything. It's great. Anyway, I love JD's dad. I love that fucking horrible supervillain of a man. He rocks. Anyway, so then yes, we're at the funeral.
We're at the funeral, and the priest is scapegoating Heather's supposed suicide on MTV and video games. We get this great montage where everyone comes up to the casket,
yes,
and prays, and we hear their thoughts as they pray.
As voiceover, yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, one of the jocks is like, "Jesus, why did you have to kill a hot piece of snatch?"
Yeah.
I was just joking. Come on, have a sense of humor. But it's one of those where they're trying to make everything about them.
Yeah, and I think it's Heather. Gosh, which one's not McNamara, and not the one that's dead?
Duke.
Yes,
the redhead.
Yes, I think it's Heather Duke who does the prayer. That's like, I prayed so many times.
Yeah.
For this to happen, I prayed so many times for Heather to die, and she's like, and now I know that you understood. Praise Jesus, Alleluia. It's so funny. It's so funny. And then yeah, we have Winona Ryder praying as well, and basically being like, technically, I didn't kill Heather. I didn't kill Heather Chandler, right? She's like, you understand, right? And then she's like, I just want my school to be a nice place. Did that sound bitchy? It's very good. I love the prayer sequence. It's so funny.
Outside the funeral, we have a scene where the nerds get picked on by the jocks because one of the nerds like steps on the jock's foot, and they go over and give him a noogie.
Yes.
And
make him say that he likes to suck big dicks.
Fat dicks.
Say I like to suck big dicks.
And I like this scene because JD just rides by on his motorcycle and looks at the jocks but doesn't do anything. I like it because he doesn't step in.
Yeah.
It shows you that he's not actually out to make anything, and he's not out to make the school a better place or actually help anyone. Right.
He's not interested in helping people. He wants to kill people. He's a serial killer.
Yeah.
Right. And what he's looking for, I think, and this is just kind of my interpretation of this, I think he's looking for someone who he can convince Veronica deserves it. Right? I don't think he actually cares I don't think JD cares whether he kills the jocks or the nerds, right? I think he wants to kill somebody. Anybody, a lot of people, everybody, as it turns out, right? But I think what he's doing when he's looking at this and kind of scoping out the two jocks is being like, I can talk Veronica into doing something to those guys.
Well, this is also, I think, his save the cat moment.
Yeah.
Because even though he's already poisoned Heather Chandler and killed her,
right?
We don't like Heather Chandler. Veronica doesn't like Heather Chandler.
Yes.
We can kind of justify it and still figure out. We're still trying to figure out how we feel about this character.
Right. And the way it plays out as well, you can still kind of give him the benefit of the doubt and be like, maybe it was sort of an accident.
Yeah.
Right.
So the fact that he doesn't get off his bike and step in to help these nerds and he just rides on, I think is him not saving the cat and revealing that he is just a kind of selfish sociopath.
Yeah.
Who's just only interested in punishing people and convincing Veronica to go along with it.
Yes. And I think at one point he even jokes about having a superiority complex, but that's absolutely the deal with this character. He's like a narcissist with a huge superiority complex where he basically thinks he is better than everybody else, right? He views them as all like dumb vermin, like insects, right? And he's the smart one.
Yeah. Heather McNamara and Veronica are talking about going out tonight, and Heather's dating one of the jocks, and she wants Veronica to come along.
Mm-hmm.
This got the biggest laugh in the movie for me because
yes.
It's just so perfectly paced. Where Veronica's like, "We better not be getting shit faced and going cow tipping again," and it cuts to the jocks and the girls in a pasture cow tipping, and the jocks are totally wasted.
Yes. Yep. And then they tip a cow and everybody gets like mud all over them and shit. It's very funny. And then in this scene, by the way, and I did not notice this until the Podmaster pointed it out to me this time when we were watching it. But so basically what happens, the cow tipping's happening. Veronica's having a bad time. Heather McNamara and one of the jocks are like off in the background, and he's like actively sexually assaulting her. Like she's like trying to get away from him. She's like struggling, and he has her like pinned down. And then JD rides up on his motorcycle, and Veronica and JD are having their little conversation where JD's like, let's get out of here, like ditch these losers or whatever. And in the background, anytime the camera is on Veronica, Heather McNamara and that jock are still in the background, and he's still like wrestling with her. It's so like, again, pitch black comedy, right? Because it's like you're having kind of this like high school romance conversation between Veronica and JD, and there's just like a girl getting raped in the background. It's insane. I had not noticed that was happening before in this scene.
Yeah, and once you notice it, you can't forget about it.
Right, you keep looking at it and like, oh god, it's still going. Like, gosh.
Yeah, and they do interesting things with Heather McNamara's character.
Yeah.
Kind of later in the movie that I wish maybe they had developed a little bit a little bit more because it's kind of running in the background for most of this about like
Yeah.
her arc and her experiences with mental health and because she, spoilers for later in this movie, she attempts suicide at one point.
Yeah, which is actually one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I think it's important when Veronica is kind to her.
Yes.
Right? Because it's like this kind of is my overall point with this movie. Is I think this movie is about being kind to each other. I think this is a movie that I think this is a very empathetic movie. I think a lot of people frame this movie as cynical and kind of misanthropic. And I think that the actual message of this movie is that cynicism and misanthropy are bad. And that the real radical act is kindness and empathy. And I think that the scene with Heather McNamara where she takes all the pills and then Veronica is kind to her, right? And kind of walks her back from that ledge is super important because it doesn't just mean that Veronica is only being nice to like Martha and her old friend from grade school whose name I've already lost, Betty. Yes, she's not just being nice to Martha and Betty, who are people of like a lower social strata than her. She's also being nice to one of the Heathers, who was one of the people she had a problem with at the beginning of the movie, right? And she's kind of practicing this like radical kindness of being like, even if I don't like you, I'm going to be kind to you, right? And so I love that. I love that moment later in the movie. I know we jumped way ahead, but I think it's important.
So the next day at school, Veronica hears talk that the jocks that she was out with last night bragged about
having a three-way with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The jocks she was out with last night bragged about having a three-way with her. She's also at the yearbook club, and they're asking Veronica for photos and poems and artwork from Heather that they can include in their yearbook spread that also includes her suicide
Yes,
note.
a 2-page spread on Heather Chandler. Yes, where they're going to include a printed copy of her suicide.
The yearbook club's really like, how can we make this suicide about us? How can we make this
And I love
memorable?
the kid who's like in charge of the yearbook who's talking to Veronica here, and he's like, it's more tasteful than it sounds.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Yeah.
So that night she calls up the jocks and invites them to have a three-way
For real.
For
Yes,
real.
Since they've been lying about it, she's like, why don't we just make this actually happen? And immediately they're fucking idiots, so they don't see that this is obviously a trap.
Yeah. In the woods behind school the next day, and JD's there.
Yep.
And they have guns, and they're gonna shoot them.
Yes, JD has told Veronica that this is a special type of bullet that breaks the skin and tranquilizes, but does not actually kill people.
And Veronica is in an abusive relationship.
Yes.
She's in a manipulative relationship.
Yes.
However, she should be smarter than this.
And she is, I think, because later when she realizes that they were just real bullets all along, she does say, like, I'm an idiot. Like, how could I possibly have believed that? And I think that the thing with this is she needs it to be true because she is in love with JD. Like, he's manipulating her and emotionally and psychologically abusing her, right? But she is in love with him, right? And so I think she needs to believe that he's telling the truth about this because she's like, I can't have this guy be a first-degree premeditated murderer, right?
She originally asks, like, can't we just use blanks again? And then he says, no, these are special bullets that knock you out and just break the skin a little bit so you'll bleed. And it looks like you got shot, but we'll actually just knock the jocks out with them.
Yeah.
It's a hair far-fetched for me.
But also this is satire. You know what's a hair far-fetched?
I would think Winona Ryder would be smarter than that.
Yeah. You know what's a hair far-fetched for me is that Veronica Sawyer ends this movie without being arrested for murder. Although I guess DNA evidence was only first used in like 1986. So by 88, I did Google this. The Podmaster is looking skeptically. I Googled to verify. DNA evidence was only first used in like 1986. So I think Veronica Sawyer benefits a lot from that because I bet the Ohio medical examiner didn't have access to DNA yet, which, you know, because she's touching all of these dead bodies. Heather Chandler, her hands are all over her. Once these jocks get shot, her and JD are both touching them a bunch. I'm like, your prints, your DNA's fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, these are poorly executed crimes. Anyway,
Their plan is to shoot them and stage it to look like a suicide, and Veronica's going to write a suicide note that implies that they were in a gay relationship,
in a
with
closeted
each
gay
other.
relationship. Yeah.
And I also like JD has a bunch of like gay props that they're going to stage around the
mineral
scene.
water thing is really fun.
The mineral water thing is funny. It's one of the I generally had trouble with some of the homophobic stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
As one probably should.
Yes.
In this day and age.
I do think
But the joke about this is the middle of Ohio. If you're not drinking beer, you should be people will think you should be in a dress or whatever.
Right. And so them planting mineral water at the scene is a clear indicator that these guys were homosexual. Speaking about quickly the homophobic stuff in this movie, and especially like this plot point of like them staging this to look like these jocks were like in a gay relationship with each other. I do think it's important to note that this is JD's idea. That's it. It's kind of clearly stated in the movie that this was his idea. And I think the movie clearly painting JD as a villainous psychopath, right? The fact that the homophobic idea comes from him, while I think that the movie still gets a lot of comic stuff at the expense of like societal assumptions about gay people, I do think it's worth noting that the person who's like, wouldn't it be so funny if we pretended that these guys were gay, is also a guy who is the villain of the movie.
Yeah, and everyone who uses homophobic language in this movie are also antagonistic characters.
Right. It's
like
never,
the jocks, the
yeah.
Heathers use it at some points.
It's never really used, at least the F slur is never really used in a way where you are supposed to find it funny.
Yeah.
It's always kind of used as to show these kids being really mean to each other. So anyway, so yeah, they lure the jocks out into the woods, and the jocks think they're gonna get laid. Veronica's basically like, "Hey, take your clothes off," and they're like, "Aren't you gonna take your clothes off?" And she's like, "I thought you'd rip them off me, big boy," or whatever. And then she basically, I think, does a count to three situation.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I'm gonna count to three, and then you're both gonna come here and fuck me. And on three, JD jumps out and shoots one of the jocks in the neck. And then Veronica's supposed to shoot the other one. They have two guns. And she goes to shoot. She misses him. And JD has to run him down. And this sequence is legitimately pretty tense.
There's like horror synths in the background.
Yes. Yeah. It is very much like, yeah, the killer is chasing down like this beefcake jock.
Well, and Veronica laughs too.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, she thinks this is just like a game or a prank. She doesn't realize that the bullets are real, which again is stupid.
It's very stupid.
But her like kind of laughing as she shoots one of them or shoots at one of them is kind of unsettling.
Yeah.
And then JD takes off and they kind of circle back around to the site, and Veronica actually shoots him in the chest, and he falls over and dies.
Yes, this is Veronica's confirmed kill of the movie.
Yeah.
She does fully murder one person in this movie. So the jocks are both dead. And then, so when the second gunshot goes off, or the third gunshot, I guess, goes off here, and the second jock gets killed, we cut to these cops in a cop car who are just like parked on a road nearby, and they're smoking a joint. They're like getting stoned in the police cruiser, and one of the cops turns to the other one and is like, "No, I for sure heard it that time. That was like definitely a gunshot." And the other cop like exhales a big cloud of weed smoke, puts his little patrol hat on, and goes, "Oh shit, let's roll." which I fucking loved. I thought it was so funny. Also, that cop looks so much like Paul Scheer.
Oh yeah,
He looks
I know who you're talking about.
He looks exactly like Paul Scheer. I thought it was really funny. Anyway,
And they stage the scene. What I noticed was they give the wrong gun, like they put the guns in the jocks' hands, and they give them each the wrong guns.
Yes.
So the one that JD shot, JD puts his gun in his hand, and the one that Veronica shot, she puts her gun in his hand.
Right.
So any crime scene evidence, because JD has like a hand cannon, and Veronica
has like a little tiny pistol,
like a little tiny pistol that she could carry in her purse.
Yeah.
So any crime scene would unearth that something's fucked up about this.
Yeah, and I think that's part of, like, the movie is kind of intentionally being like, yeah, like adults kind of don't give a shit about the kids to the point where, like, they're not even really investigating. They're like, oh, we found a suicide note. Yeah, that's what teens do.
Yeah,
right?
and when the cops show up, JD and Veronica take off and run down the hill to their car.
Yes, and we get the really funny pin on the mineral water gag here.
Yeah,
that's I guess in a second, but yeah, we get the button on the mineral water gag because the cops are responding to the scene, and there's like the bag of quote unquote gay stuff planted at the scene, and they pull out the mineral water. And they like kind of have a knowing look with each other, and I think one of the cops says something like, "Oh, they were fruitcakes" or something. Like, it's like
I think we get a slur here, but yeah, it
it's
is the payoff of the joke.
It's funny. Anyway, so yeah, JD and Veronica run down to the car and like just start making out and ripping each other's clothes off, so that when the cops like come and find them, it's clear that they weren't involved at all.
Yeah.
They've just been here making out.
But then the Paul Scheer cop is like, no, I got this handled, which is funny. Like, he's got this whole crime scene figured out. And then the other cop that's down where the car is radios back, and he's like, it's just kids making out here. And then Paul Scheer is like, are they naked?
Yeah, and the other cop looks a little disgusted by that, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
he's like, what the fuck, man? And then from there we have Veronica and JD getting into a fight in JD's car. Or he rides a motorcycle, might be Veronica's car, I don't fucking know. They're in a car and they get into a fight basically where Veronica is like, those were real bullets, weren't they? And JD's like, yeah, of course they were. And she's like, I'm such a fucking idiot, how did I ever believe that? And this is basically Veronica going like, this has gone way too far, we cannot do this anymore. She like lights the cigarette lighter in the car, which just made me nostalgic for the days of cigarette lighters and ashtrays in motor vehicles. We must return.
Yeah, my first car had one of those.
Yeah.
That was our generation.
But yeah, I think she burns herself with the cigarette lighter.
She burns herself with the cigarette lighter, and then JD lights his cigarette off of her burn.
Yes, yeah. Just a very fucked up relationship that they have here. Yeah, so she's sort of had enough here. She doesn't fully break it off yet, but we get the impression that she is trying to distance herself from this behavior and from JD in general, right?
And then we have the funeral for the two jocks. It's a joint funeral for these guys. They're buried in their
football uniforms, like with their helmets, and then they like each casket has a football in it.
Yeah.
Which is very funny.
And then we get the monologue from one of the dads here.
I love my dead gay son.
And I like this comment from, I can't remember who it is who says it, but someone mentions like, I wonder if he would have said that.
That's JD.
JD says that.
Yeah, JD is basically like, I wonder if he would have felt the same way if he had a son with a limp wrist, which is obviously a euphemism for homosexuality, with a pulse, right? And Veronica does laugh at that. She laughs in response. And then a girl who is presumably one of the jocks' like younger sister, in a pew up ahead of them turns around and has tears streaming down her face and is looking at Veronica because Veronica's giggling at her brother's funeral, right? And they kind of make eye contact for a second, and Veronica starts feeling really fucking bad.
Yeah, it's a really good little moment.
Yeah, I love this moment because, again, I think this movie is about replacing cynicism and lack of care for your fellow man with like empathy, right? And I think that this is a nice moment that hammers that in, which is like, yeah, even though you didn't like this person, they were a human being and there are like people who loved them in this room, right? Like, show some goddamn respect, you fucking shitty teens. Anyway.
Yeah. We have another teacher meeting here. There's one great line here where they're trying to wrestle with all of these suicides, these apparent suicides that have been happening. And the principal is like, I've seen bad stuff, but never like this. And he says, he starts listing off things and he gets to sexually explicit photography displays involving tennis rackets, but nothing like this.
Yeah.
And this is where the hippie teacher proposes, like, let's all go into the cafeteria and talk and share and
She's
feel.
Doing her little love-in pitch, right? And they're like, well, we've tried everything else and kids are still killing themselves, so let's give this hippie idea a shot, right? And then, like we talked about earlier, it happens and there's a whole TV crew there, and it's very much just clearly for this lady's own ego. Yeah.
And JD and Veronica are back at his house and they're watching this on TV.
Yeah, and kind of mocking it, right?
And there's also this pop song that's going around that is
Teen Suicide Don't Do It.
Teen Suicide Don't Do It by Big Fun.
Oh, which everyone wearing the Big Fun shirts in this movie, by the way, very, very fun touch.
Yeah.
I love, like, at one point Martha's wearing one. The kid who I think runs the newspaper, we see him in a Big Fun shirt at one point. The hanged doll, which we'll get to in a little bit, has a Big Fun shirt on. I just love that as like a visual motif in this
there's
movie.
posters in the background.
It's just like a white t-shirt with massive black block letters that says Big Fun.
So JD shoots the radio, and this then prompts the argument where Veronica just wants to break up with him and leave.
Yeah, because this is an unstable situation with a violent sociopath. So he's pulling his gun out and shooting radios, and she's like, oh yeah, I should not be part of this anymore.
Yeah, and he grabs her and like kind of forces himself on her in terms of like he's just kissing her very violently and holding her.
Yeah, he really starts throwing her around here. It's a thing that he kind of does a couple more times in the movie. He kind of turns on a dime here where he's obviously been violent toward other people in the movie already. But he has mostly been playing the sweet intellectual boyfriend to Veronica until she tries to leave, and then he just immediately turns violent.
Yeah, from here he is just fully a monster.
Yeah.
Like before he's kind of an anti-hero,
right?
You know, Tyler Durden in high school type figure, but now he's just fully the antagonist.
He's trying to be like a James Dean type early in the movie, and then it's like, oh no, he's not a James Dean type. He is what guys like that often are actually like in real life, which is violent misogynists.
Yeah. From here, we see JD meets with Heather Duke.
Yep.
In one of the rooms at school, and blackmails her with photos of her and Martha when they were kids. And basically, if it's revealed that if they were ever friends, it's going to cause a stir and a blow to Heather's popularity.
Right. So to prevent these from coming out, what JD wants her to do is get everyone to sign a petition. And the petition, he says the petition is for Big Fun to come perform like at prom or whatever.
And the actual petitions that they give out all have different things on them too. So he's also trying to fool the students and fool Heather. And we'll get to what the petition's revealed to actually be for.
Yeah, but he basically wants everybody in school to sign this thing.
Yeah, he's trying to get everyone to sign it, and also kind of this will reinforce Heather Duke's status as the new queen bee of the school.
Right.
And she wears the red scarf that Heather McNamara,
Heather Chandler.
God,
Yeah.
it's a problem when 3 characters have the same name.
The movie is called Heathers.
There's multiple of them.
There's 3 of them.
The red headscarf that Heather Chandler had wrapped up in her hair.
Right. Yeah. Which is like her like status symbol.
Yeah.
It's like the presidential seal or a crown or something.
We get a short scene here with Veronica playing croquet with her friend Betty, and it's like the first time they've hung out in a while.
Right.
And it's interrupted by the Heathers showing up.
Yeah.
And Betty just kind of heads home.
Yeah. But it's, I think, important that Veronica is clearly having a very nice time hanging out with Betty.
Yeah.
It's a thing that I want to point out here because I think it's important to viewing Veronica kind of as like the hero of this movie, that she's not hanging out with Betty out of pity. She's not like, I feel bad that like I went and got popular and left this person who I used to be friends with behind, so I'm going to like throw her a bone and hang out with her. It's very clear that Veronica is getting a lot out of hanging out with her, right? It's very clear that this like friendship is more fulfilling to her than her interactions with like the Heathers, right? Which I just think it's an important thing to point out.
And there's an important moment here where Veronica has like the opera. I don't know how croquet works, like you said.
Yeah.
Rich sport for rich people.
Yes.
There's an opportunity that she has to knock her ball out of position.
Yeah.
But Veronica doesn't do it because she says she's not like that.
Right.
And I think that's very telling of what her character's like.
Right. She's basically like, I don't want to win by setting somebody else back. Right. Which there's a lot of, I won't do a whole fucking huge spiel on it, but there is a lot of socioeconomic commentary. I already mentioned the Reaganism thing. I think this movie is about class in a big way. And I think that comment from Veronica is very indicative of this movie's opinion on class disparity, right? Where Veronica, who is like a rich person, like she's from a well-off family, right? She's adopted the mindset that's like not popular within the world of this movie and like the world of the other rich kids, which is like, I don't want to get ahead by hurting somebody else, right? And I just think that's, yeah, to your point, like a very it's very indicative of her character.
Yeah.
And I think plays into the class stuff in the movie.
There's a scene inside Veronica's house where the school, we see the broadcast again of the hippie teacher kind of doing like a PSA on suicide, and Veronica and her parents are watching it, and they have an argument here about how the world doesn't treat teenagers as people.
Yes. And her mom has a really great response to that, which is she says something to the effect of, usually when teenagers complain that they aren't being treated like adults, it's because they are. Right. And the world, her mom's point is like, yeah, you feel like the world's being unfair to you, a teenager. Guess what? The world is unfair. Right. Like that's what being an adult is. There's also a very funny line here where Veronica says something about how the teenagers are always being patronized to like bunny rabbits or something, and her dad responds, I don't patronize bunny rabbits.
Yeah.
Which I love. Anyway,
but I like it a lot because it just shows how out of touch all the adults are in this movie, even our parents.
Yeah.
And as much as there is some truth to the world not being fair, these are also still kids.
Yeah, and it's the responsibility of the parents to teach kids that.
Yeah.
Right? And they aren't. Right? So it's like you see both sides of the argument, right? Where on the one side, her parents are like, get over it. The world's not fair. And she's basically, from her perspective, it's like, yeah, but you never told me the world was like that. Nobody warned me. Right? So yeah, I agree. I like that moment a lot.
And this is all intercut with a really sad scene of Martha sitting alone in her big fun shirt and writing a suicide note, stapling it to her shirt, and then slowly walking into traffic.
Yeah.
And then once that scene is over, we don't see what happens. Once that scene is over, Heather Duke comes over to Veronica's house in the middle of this argument and talks about how Martha stepped into traffic and she survived.
Yeah.
And starts making jokes about it. And Veronica slaps her in the face.
Yes.
Hard.
Which is, that's the correct reaction, right? It's like, you don't fucking joke about that. Like, you monster. Also, I want to approach this delicately. This is the second movie that we have covered where someone walks into traffic. The other one being Rango.
Yeah.
It's very sad and affecting here. It's also kind of a big emotional point in Rango. You know, I like movies that are awful and make me feel like shit. You know this about me.
Yes.
So I don't want to say I like when someone walks into traffic in a movie, because I don't like that. And if you're thinking about walking into traffic, please don't. Please get help. However, in a movie, when someone hits rock bottom and walks into a busy street, just walks into traffic, it is always a thing that works on me as a viewer. I'm always like, man, they're just fucking walking into traffic. Oh God. Oh, I love to see it, but I also hate to see it. I love how bad it makes me feel when that happens in a movie.
Justus, when you said I'm going to approach this delicately,
yes,
I don't know that we've ever approached anything delicately on this show. So the hairs on the back of my neck stood up.
I just didn't want to be like, I love when people walk into traffic in movies.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's evocative and effectively disturbing.
Yes.
Especially both this and Rango, the character sort of hypes himself up to do it. Well, both in this and Rango, the character walks into traffic like very calmly.
Yeah.
And deliberately.
Yeah.
The best use of this I've seen, I believe it's an Indian film that I saw in college called The World of Apu, which is part of a trilogy. There's a part in that movie where Apu is standing on a train platform, just kind of zoning out as trains go by.
Mm.
And it's implied that I don't know if I can't remember if he actually does it or not. I don't think he does. But it's like this character's at his last, on his last legs. He's at the end of his rope, literally. And he's just like feeling the weight of the world crash down around him. And he's just staring wide-eyed into this rail yard.
Right.
Ready to just fall in at any moment and get crushed
like,
by a train.
I might just allow myself to fall on these train tracks right now. Again, not a nice thing that happens in movies, but a thing that I enjoy in some films. is a character hitting that level of like, well, I guess I'm just gonna walk it onto the highway. Anyway, don't like it when Martha does it. It's very sad and very upsetting. But also, it is part of what gives this movie that razor sharp edge that I was talking about, right? It's moments like this that are not funny at all and very effectively upsetting and disturbing.
Yes.
That make the black comedy, like that make the jokes hit even harder. It's really punchy because of stuff like this.
Later that night, Heather and Veronica are talking, and Veronica is still clearly mad at her. They turn on this like late night radio show that people are calling
like
in due to advice, and they recognize Heather McNamara's voice. And Heather is talking about how everyone she knows is dying and killing themselves.
Mm.
And she feels depressed too. And of course her boyfriend was one of the jocks.
Yes. Her date rapist boyfriend
was one of the jocks who died.
Has been murdered. Yeah.
The next morning at school, this is the scene we talked about earlier. She goes into the bathroom to basically down a bottle of pills.
Mm.
And Veronica shows up just in time to save her.
Yeah. And there's a really sweet, tender moment between the two of them that I already sort of gave you my thoughts on and how I think it's kind of important to the movie and important to Veronica's character. And it's really nice to see one of the Heathers vulnerable, right? And to see Veronica support her.
Yeah. This worked. I watched this twice because I had some stuff distracting me during my first viewing, and wanted to go back and rewatch it before this morning. This worked better for me the second go around. I like this moment where they kind of slump down against the wall and sit on the floor, and Heather puts her head on Veronica's shoulder and she comforts her. It's really sweet and nice, and I wish we had a little bit more of Heather McNamara's character arc in the story rather than just having it in the background.
She's the least developed Heather for sure.
But there's enough there that you kind of get it, because obviously Heather Chandler was mean to everyone, including the Heathers, the other Heathers. And, you know, she is a victim of assault.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that, like, kids can be depressed and not always show it.
Right.
And people can be depressed and not always show it. You don't know everyone's story.
Right. And you can be rich and popular. She's a member of the cheerleading team. She's very popular. She's very rich. You can have all those things and still be like deeply unhappy, you know? And yeah, so I like that with her character as well. And I agree. I wish we got a little bit more of her, but I think what we do get is pretty effective.
There's a moment here where Heather Duke and Veronica confront each other, and Heather Duke admits that JD kind of pressured her into getting these petitions passed around, and how they're all bullshit. And JD shows up to try to take Veronica back and is just being a real creep about it.
Yep. And she has like one moment of being like, he is really hot and I used to be in love with him. And then she kind of snaps out of it and is like, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
You murderous psycho. Right. Which he reacts to this with such surprise. He's so upset by her refusing to come back to him that it's very clear to me that in the character's head, this was like not a possibility. He was like, oh yeah, of course she'll come back to me because I'm the best.
He's like totally convinced that she wants him back.
Yes. And then when she makes it very abundantly clear that she doesn't, he immediately plans to murder her. Yeah. Right? Because his thing is basically like, well, I guess she is like everybody else, which means she deserves to die. Right.
Yeah. When she gets home, she finds out that her parents say that JD stopped by and told them that he was worried and she was going to kill herself,
and left an envelope for her, which apparently they did not look inside. Yeah. Which I was like, these parents do have a responsibility.
Yeah.
When there's so much fucking suicide and death going around at this school that she attends. If some kid in a trench coat who you don't know shows up and is like, give this to your daughter, you as a parent must read that. Because what it is basically proof that JD can imitate Veronica's handwriting, meaning that he can make her death look like a suicide, and he is planning to murder her.
Right. And she goes upstairs into her room and finds the doll that's hanging from a string,
from a noose
made of string with the big fun shirt on.
I love the tiny big fun shirt. It's such a funny visual gag. And so yeah, she's fully like, yes, this is a threat on my life, and she decides to take a nap.
Hey, look.
The podmaster is nodding very vigorously, basically being like, yes, in this situation, the podmaster would also take a nap.
There are so many horror movies that if I would take a nap in.
Yeah, that's
like true. If I woke up in a saw trap,
take a nap.
I'm just gonna take a nap.
Because then at least you die asleep. You'll die in your sleep.
That's what I liked about so the director of Five Nights at Freddy's, she previously did a Western horror movie called The Wind. And the scary sequences in that movie are interrupted by the main character taking a nap. She takes a nap in between scares, which totally makes sense.
Yeah.
You just need a little nappy nap from
just be like, well, I guess if my psycho murderer boyfriend who I just broke up with is going to climb through my window and murder me, I should at least be asleep when that happens.
There are few problems in this world that cannot be solved by taking a little snooze.
The podmaster is in such...
I have never seen her more into
this is the most
any subject on this show.
Yeah, most engaged she's ever been in the podcast, of course. But anyway, she loves napping. She's a big nap advocate. So anyway, she takes a nap. This is the dream sequence that we alluded to earlier. She basically dreams that she is at another funeral. I love the aesthetics of this dream sequence. You used the word Lynchian earlier, which I agree is overused to the point where sometimes it kind of doesn't mean anything. This dream sequence does feel Lynch adjacent, however, right? There's like all the people in the pews are wearing 3D glasses. Which I love. And you know, on the one hand, it's like, that's kind of a weird off the wall choice that they might be making just for the sake of being weird and off the wall. On the other hand, it does sort of feel intentional and pointed that they're wearing 3D glasses, because it's like, they're essentially watching this funeral as if it's entertainment, as if it's a movie, right?
Well, yeah, because this movie is partially about violence and suicide as a media frenzy,
right,
as a trend.
Yes. So I like that choice. And then Veronica's sort of at the back of the church where this funeral is happening. Heather Chandler walks up. It's, like I said, kind of the same lighting-ish as the alley sequence, which didn't occur to me until this watch, and I thought it was a really cool choice. And they have a little exchange. I do like Heather Chandler being like, being dead is so boring, it sucks so bad. If I have to sing Kumbaya one more fucking time.
Yeah. There were like 70 more people at my funeral.
Yeah.
Is a line that I like.
Yeah.
Everything's a dream.
Yeah.
Veronica wakes up. She has another diary segment here where she talks about no one else is going to stop JD.
She's got that monocle in. She's just scribbling away.
But she's looking
like Mr. Peanut.
She's going to fake her own suicide.
Yeah.
And we get a shot of him outside of her house sitting on his motorbike with his gun, and he lights a cigarette.
Yep.
And
it was like, time to go kill the love of my life.
Yep. Sometimes that happens, man.
Sometimes that does happen.
Sometimes you gotta just shoot down a woman and write a country song about it.
So he sneaks in her window and sees that she has hung herself. She hanged herself. Sorry, apologies, Podmaster. I used the wrong form of the word hanged. She has hanged herself with a bedsheet. And she just said, "You know better." I do know better.
And JD catches himself monologuing as villains are wont to do.
Right.
And reveals that the petition is actually like a declaration that the students that they're going to engage in a mass suicide event.
Yes, it's a mass suicide note.
And JD's going to actually just blow up the school.
Yes, which again, crazy that this movie is pre-Columbine.
Crazy.
Because they tried to do that and the bombs just didn't work for some reason. I don't remember if they didn't go off or if they didn't end up doing them. It's that they didn't go off. Yeah. But yes, the Columbine kids did, in addition to shooting up the school, they planned to blow it up. And body count would have been way higher if they had succeeded. Yeah. Anyway.
JD sneaks out and his mother, JD slips out of her room and Veronica's mother walks in, shocked that her daughter is hanging from the ceiling by a bedsheet.
Yes, and her immediate reaction is, "I should have let you get that job at the mall." I just love that she's immediately like, "This is my fault somehow."
And Veronica wakes up or whatever,
yeah, she shows that she's alive.
Shows she's alive.
Yeah,
she slumps down on her bed, and she's like tied the bed sheet around her waist.
Yeah, so that it was loose on her neck, and she was being held up by her waist. So then Veronica goes to school the next day. Because she knows JD's plan, which is to blow up the school, right? And so she's there. She's trying to make sure that JD doesn't see her because he thinks she's dead. She is trying to figure out where he is planting the bombs. In the sequence, we do see JD like setting up like little bundles of like dynamite or whatever like under the bleachers. And then he like goes down into the boiler room to like set up a bigger bomb.
Yeah, Veronica's walking down the hallway and sees that everything's like the whole school is empty. Then everyone gets out of class and they all start heading the same direction. And she asks one of the kids what's going on. And there's a pep assembly that's in the gym. And then she immediately asks, well, what's under the gym? And it's the boiler room.
Yes.
And earlier in the movie, when JD's dad was going on one of his demolition demolition rants, furiously stroking his cock as he talked about blowing up a building. He talked about putting explosives on one of the higher floors in the building and in the boiler room. So when the boiler room detonated, it also triggered the explosives at the top of the building.
Right.
And so she assumes that that's what JD's doing. She's right. She goes down to the boiler room.
Freddy Krueger's there in his little sweater. He's, oh, sorry, wrong movie. Sorry, school boiler room.
School boiler room.
I just expect Robert Englund to be there anytime there's a high school boiler room.
Yeah, not aware
in an 80s movie.
I'm not aware that we had one. If we did, it certainly must not have been below ground.
Subterranean boiler rooms, I think, are not an Arizona thing because the ground here is too hard to make basements most of the time. Yeah. So if we had a boiler room at either of our schools, it was probably above ground. Yeah.
I'm sure that if there had been one, I'm sure there would have been some myths about it, about kids going down there and not coming back or whatever.
I don't think, but Arizona doesn't have a lot of basements in general. Either in residential or commercial buildings.
So she pulls, she has JD's gun.
Yes.
And I don't know how she gets JD's gun.
Also, for clarity, Freddy Krueger is not actually in this boiler room. Sorry.
That'd be a wild crossover.
Yes, she has his gun.
Oh, JD!
Time to rot, Rottweilers! They're the Rottweilers, right? That's the mascot?
It's time for you to blow up. And he's got he stabs him with the glove, but the glove has little bits of dynamite on it. And he shoves it in his stomach and then he blows up.
Freddy Krueger is not in this movie. She has his gun.
She has his giant magnum. I don't know how she gets it, but she pulls the gun on him. He knocks her out, overpowers her, and takes her gun and takes off into the boiler room like Alfred Molina, running to the back room in Boogie Nights.
Yeah.
Veronica grabs a fire extinguisher and sneaks up on him as he's rigging up one of the detonators and hits him in the head and knocks his gun away. He goes crawling for it, and then he grabs her and starts kissing her forcefully again.
Yes.
She throws him off and grabs the gun, and he runs. He takes off again deeper into the boiler room.
Yeah. We're intercutting here with the pep rally as well. We're seeing kind of what's going on upstairs. I think a kind of important thing here is when we're cutting up to the pep rally, everybody looks very happy and like they're having a good time. And I think that's important because JD has basically convinced himself his kind of idea about why he's blowing up the school is basically society has made the world not worth living in for teens. They've been abandoned by society and by their parents, and they're just better off dead. Is kind of his mentality. And we kind of see in the cuts up to the pep assembly that is fundamentally untrue, because people are smiling, people are clapping, people are having a good time, right? They don't look like they're unhappy.
Yeah, and even the principal, who's been portrayed pretty cynically in the movie so far, is leading the school in a chant, and he seems excited and peppy. Yeah. And there's a great cutaway gag here where one of the stoners is smoking weed under the bleachers, and she reaches up to strike her match against the bleachers right next to one of the bundles of dynamite.
Yeah, the flame almost touches the dynamite. It's really funny. Anyway, so we're back down in the boiler room, and JD sort of emerges from the shadows here, right?
Yeah, he emerges from the shadows and flips her off, and she just blows his middle finger off.
Yes, I do love her shooting. He flips the bird and she just shoots it right off. And again, he seems so shocked by this.
Yeah,
it seems like it never occurred to him that she was capable of being violent toward him.
Yeah.
And then so he's like bleeding. She's basically like, tell me how to defuse the bomb, like tell me how to turn it off. He says try the red button, which is funny because there's 3 buttons and they're all red. And she's like stop fucking with me, like like this is happening whether you like it or not, like we're gonna turn this thing off. And he's like, I'll try the middle red button or whatever, and she basically immediately knows that's bullshit. She's basically like, if I press that middle red button, like it's gonna explode.
Yeah.
Right?
This is where he starts talking about like the purpose behind blowing up the school is that society is going to view this mass suicide not as a reaction to society, but the idea that the school is society itself, and the only way that people of different social classes can coexist peacefully is in heaven.
Yes.
Which I think, to your point, is disproven by the fact that like everyone seems to be having a good time at the pep assembly.
Yes, and also like the movie very clearly takes a stance that what he's saying is wrong.
Yes.
Right? In showing us Veronica being kind to both Heather McNamara and also to Betty in previous scenes, right? It's like she like the way to conquer like societal and class differences is just through like radical empathy, right? And it's like that's the opposite of what JD's saying. He's basically like, people who are too different can never get along, right? And I think that the movie is pretty firmly saying no, they can, and it starts with just being nice to each other.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, I think this movie, which is a pitch black comedy that is somewhat violent and profane, right, is weirdly very sweet at its core. I think that there is an element of this movie that is like really positive. And it really hit me this time, more than previous watches. Anyway, so JD is basically like buying time here, right? To kind of rally after he had his finger shot off. And he does try and like go at Veronica again, to ensure that the bomb will go off. And she, I think, shoots him in the chest.
Yeah, he lunges at her with a switchblade.
With a knife.
And the switchblade gets stuck into the detonator, which seems to deactivate it.
Yeah, the bomb stops ticking down once the knife goes in.
And she blasts him right in the fucking chest, and he falls over.
Yep. And so then she walks out of the school. Bomb has stopped counting down, so we're all good there, right? And she leaves the school. She kind of is like standing out in front, and then we see JD come out. He's not dead, but he is mortally wounded, right? And they have like a kind of a last conversation here. Well, really, he kind of has a last entitled rant.
Yeah, and he's like he says, "You impressed me. I didn't expect this from you. I didn't think you were this strong." JD's like impressed by her and says, "I didn't expect you to be this strong," or something like that, which is just another shitty, insulting thing to say to her, that he does kind of through this pretense of being cool,
yeah,
and charismatic and edgy.
Yeah, and she sort of doesn't really dignify anything that he says here with a response.
Yeah.
She kind of looks, to me, she's looking at him sort of pityingly, almost. It's like she kind of feels bad that he's like this, right? And I think that there's a person in there who, again, like she sort of fell in love with him earlier in the movie. There's a person there that she could have loved. It's just buried under all of these layers of, self-importance and psychopathy, right? And so she kind of is looking at him like she feels bad for him, right? And then he reveals that he has rigged himself up a bomb vest and blows himself the fuck up.
Yeah, which we see off screen.
You
know me.
Yeah.
If there's a chance to watch a dummy be torn asunder,
yes, with a big fireball.
With a big fireball on a movie, I want to see it.
Yes, I do have in my notes, really wish we saw JD explode.
I just want to see this kid get splattered across this parking lot.
Yeah. I think it would not have been too against the tone of the movie to see him explode. I really think that they could have done it, and they chose not to, and that is maybe the choice in the movie that I have the biggest problem with, is that I wanted to
You just want to watch this kid fucking die.
I wanted to see Christian Slater blow into 500 pieces. Yes.
Veronica, before he detonates himself, she takes out a cigarette and it's just hanging in her mouth. And then the explosion again lights it somehow.
Yes, which is very
cool and badass. And she blows out a puff of air and smirks to herself.
Yes, and she at this point looks like Wile E. Coyote after he's had a box of Acme TNT blow up in his face. She's covered in like cartoonish ash and her hair is like all sticking out and crazy. And yeah, she walks back into the school. The pep assembly has ended.
And everyone's heard the explosion and they're running out to see what happened.
Right, so she's kind of walking in the opposite direction of everybody else. She sees Heather Duke. Heather Duke is like, Veronica, you look like hell.
And she's like, I just got back.
And takes a little puff of that cigarette.
Puffs that cigarette. Totally badass.
Yep. And then
Winona Ryder cementing herself as a fucking star.
Yeah.
This movie,
yep.
Honestly.
Yeah. She gives Heather Duke a big kiss on the cheek. Too.
Oh, yeah.
And then she takes the bow out of Heather Duke's hair, the red bow from Heather Chandler, and puts it in her own hair. And she says, there's a new sheriff in town, which I think is very funny.
And then she walks off and sees Martha, who we haven't seen since her suicide attempt. And Martha's in like a wheelchair scooter and all bandaged up. She walks over to Martha and says, I don't have my date for the prom flaked out on me. They're scraping him up off the parking lot right now.
Yeah, there's a crater in the pavement.
Do you want to come over and watch movies that night?
Yeah. And
Martha has her only line of the movie where she just says, I like that. And they just walk down the hall together.
Yeah.
And the movie ends and it's a really sweet and nice ending.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, you get the impression here that Veronica is not doing this out of pity for Martha, right?
Yeah.
She is now free to be, because she has rid herself of her shitty, abusive, toxic friends and her shitty, abusive, toxic boyfriend, right? She's now free to be the person who she wants to be. And what she wants to do is rent some new releases and pop some popcorn and hang out with Martha watching movies, right? And it's like, I love that that's the message of the movie, is it's like, be kind to people, not because you get anything from it, but because it's what you want to do, right? It's a sweet ending.
Sweet ending.
It really works. And we get another cover of Que Sera, Sera.
Yeah.
A different one.
Que Sera, Sera is not only in every movie, it's also used multiple times in every movie.
Yes,
apparently.
yes. 2 covers in this movie.
Justus.
Yeah.
Heathers.
Yes.
The movie we just watched.
Yeah.
Tell the people. Is it the greatest movie ever made?
The people demand to know. they clamor.
Our 20 listeners.
David, Heathers from 1988. One of the great high school movies of all time, I think. I don't think that's a divisive statement at all. I think most people would kind of consider this one, especially, now in the 2020s when it's fully achieved, like cemented itself in like that cult film status. I don't think you'll get a lot of argument that this is one of the great high school movies. Definitely, we didn't talk about it hardly at all. Part of the reason we didn't talk about it at all is because you've never seen it. But big parallels between this movie and Mean Girls. I think this movie was a huge influence on Mean Girls. Of the two, because they are kind of similar in their popularity, how people regard them, and the type of movie that they are. I think I'll take Heathers over Mean Girls any day of the week. And I love Mean Girls, but I think Heathers is just funnier, sharper, meaner, and has more of just that razor sharp edge to it that I was talking about.
It should be called Meaner Girls.
Meaner Girls. Meanest Girl.
They're doing well. They already did a Mean Girls 2. They're doing another Mean Girls, and I'm surprised they did not do Mean Girls, Meaner Girls, Meanest Girls.
Meanest Girls, even Meaner Girls. But with all of that said, David, I think this is a movie that I greatly enjoy, that I'll revisit from time to time throughout my life. And one of those that, like the thesis of this podcast states, when I'm watching, nothing else really matters in the world because I'm watching Heathers. David? Yeah, sure, I'll throw it to it. Heathers is the greatest movie ever made.
Okay.
Yeah. David, is Heathers the greatest movie ever made?
This is a great fucking movie. This movie goes hard.
Yeah.
It's raw as hell, to use the parlance of our time. I love that razor sharp wit. I love the edge this movie has. I love that, like you said, ultimately it is about empathy at the end of the day, but it does that through a movie that is steeped in black comedy and social satire that I don't think always fully works for me. And that's okay. I think movies can present a bunch of themes, not always be the most coherent with them, and kind of leave it up to you to figure out. But some of the dated aspects in this movie just hold it back a little bit for me. I am glad that this movie exists because I feel like you could not update this for a modern time. It feels perfect. It feels relevant for its time, also timeless and relevant today. But if you did it today, it would be made by someone who got the wrong message from this movie.
Yeah,
which it sounds like that's what the TV show ended up being.
Or they would just completely neuter it, right? Like I feel like nowadays, if you made this movie, they would just take the balls off this thing. They'd remove the cojones.
Yeah, it would be a PG-13.
Yeah,
instead of a very deserved R that this movie has. I love elements of the production design, some of the weird dream sequences, the colors, the costuming, the set design, all very trippy and fun and weird, and again, timeless in its own way. But I don't think Heathers is the greatest movie ever made.
Fair enough.
Strong recommendation.
Yeah.
And I'm also a fan of 80s high school movies, too. I didn't mention that, but Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, all those movies are great. I think this is a great send-up of those. So, and this, among that genre, this is one of my favorites as well.
Yeah.
But I just don't think, for me, personally, it is the greatest movie ever made.
Well, there you have it, everybody. We are once again divided with me saying something is the greatest movie ever made and David not saying it. It seems like that happens. Maybe it's just because it happened two episodes in a row, like Boogie Nights and then this. But I'm like, am I saying things are the greatest movie ever made too much? Am I overdoing it? And I gotta go with my gut,
Yo, sure, and I feel like I'm doubting myself and naysaying things too much, but
I think we have to accept
we've
that
both.
Yeah,
I mean, we've both liked the majority of the movies we've talked about.
True. Yeah.
So there's that.
Pretty much, except for Friday the 13th, we've liked everything. I think to some degree.
Yeah. We're keeping a Google Doc of our verdicts, and the only ones that we've both agreed on are Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight 2, and I think that's it.
I think so. And you almost said no.
I did.
Nobody Sleeps in the Woods
I pulled an audible on that one.
Yeah. So really, the one that was like an immediate yes was TCM2. And Tony and I had to talk you around to a yes on Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight.
You didn't have to convince me too hard on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Anyway,
that has been another episode of the Greatest Movie Ever Made podcast. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. Next week, we have our very first listener request episode. If you would like to request an episode, please contact us on our socials. We would be happy to talk about whatever movie you pick. As long as it's not a snuff film or something we've talked about before.
There also are some movies that we've talked about that we probably won't do. For example, the Star Wars prequels. We probably won't do an episode on those. But anything else.
Just whatever way the wind blows you, fire it off at us. We'll let you know how we feel about it.
Yeah.
This was sent in by our listener Emily. We are watching for the holiday season Santa's Sleigh from 2005, starring wrestler Bill Goldberg. I know nothing about this movie.
I also know nothing about this movie other than, our listener and college friend Emily recommended it. So, Emily, if we both fucking hate this movie, it's your fault.
Yeah.
And if we love it, thank you.
We're not doing a full month of holiday programming like we did with Halloween. But this will be one of 2 Christmas movies that we cover for the holiday season.
Yeah, we'll be sprinkling in some holiday cheer.
Yeah. Be sure you tune in for that. Until then, we will leave you with our sign off. As always,
Later, dipshits!